Today at Solus Partners, we are proud to present Christopher with Vivoka. They have a very compelling edge AI solution as it relates to field service, logistics, and healthcare. Christopher, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to join the company?
Yeah, so I started as an engineer, a research engineer in voice AI back in the late 90s, when it was still a very edgy topics, not yet working well, to be frank. I've spent most of my career building voice AI systems, and recently at companies like Scansoft, Nuance Communications, Serenc, and recently I moved to Vivoka, as I felt that this was the right time to bring voice to new sectors where it had not yet been able to bring all its benefits. Everybody knows about Siri on the phones. Everybody has probably seen voice in their cars or in call centers. But there are many professional applications for in logistics, for operators, for field service technicians, for surgeons in the operating room, where voice can bring quite a lot of added value and where it is not yet deployed for a set of reasons that we can talk about later. And I thought it was the right time to look at those issues, to take advantage of the latest AI developments, to do more in those areas with voice.
Well, obviously, coming from enterprise, especially in the cutting edge of voice technology, what stood out to you when you had obviously a bunch of different opportunities to look at relative to Vivoka? What stood out about Vivoka to you?
I think Vivoka is we're a very small company, about 20 people, but out of that we have 5 PhDs, and that means that compared to a lot of the startups you're going to run into today in the AI space that tend to just build on top of AI systems and are more focusing on the application layer, we are also able to add our own AI components to develop, to research, develop, and deploy your own AI components in addition to the ones we are going to source from common vendors like OpenAI, Serenc, Microsoft, and others. But we add our own AI components on top of it, which means that we can develop things that are more advanced in terms of the capabilities compared to the plain application level solutions you may see from others.
Could you talk to us a little bit more? I mean, it's a kind of a trendy topic to say that you have edge AI, but in Vivoka's case, I think there's some really interesting use cases. What does that typically look like?
Yeah, so what we do, we use both the cloud and the edge. We leverage the power of generative AI in the cloud when we build the voice assistant that will be then running what we call the runtime, will be the inference, if you want, in AI terminology, will be on the device. So we are going to use the cloud and at full power with GPUs to build the system, but we build it so that it's very compact and it can then be downloaded. So the voice assistant can be downloaded and run on a phone, on a tablet, on a PC, on a dedicated medical robot, for instance, running Linux, Android, or even Windows. And the reason why we have decided to do that is compared to the more common cloud-based AI solutions, what we do can deliver some benefits in terms of costs. Because once the device is there, if you run it on the device, there is barely any incremental cost for that versus running something in the cloud that can be quite demanding in terms of CPU, GPU in that case, in terms of power consumption. A lot of the cloud solutions also are oversized. They are one size fit most solution, which means that they are very demanding in terms of what the resource they consume. You can use ChatGPT to compute 2 plus 2, but that's a pretty expensive way of computing 2 plus 2. And what we do is we build professional industrial voice assistants that are more narrow in scope in what they can do, but that do it very well and very efficiently. And since they're efficient, they can run completely locally on the device, sparing you completely the cost of running them in the cloud. The second reason why you may want to do that, and very important for some applications, we don't need the cloud to run, which means that if you're a worker doing some maintenance in a furnace in a basement, without Wi-Fi, without cloud connectivity, the system still runs. If you're a surgeon coming into the operating room to do some emergency intervention and you've forgotten the Wi-Fi password of the week, the system will still run. The next reason is the privacy. It may not be important for everybody, but in medical applications, the fact that you don't need to stream the audio to the cloud is quite important. And finally, because we run locally without having to go back and forth between the device that the user uses and the cloud, the latency, the response time is much better. And again, when you talk to professionals, people that would do handling packages in logistics centers, even a fraction of a second at the end of the day counts because they will accrue during the day.
Fascinating architecture and approach. And obviously, then it's highly reliable in a lot of different settings. Could you tell us a little bit about what that means for if you're in a logistics company or if you're in healthcare or just within the field itself?
Yeah. So I will take one example in each. So if you're in logistics, one common application is something called voice picking. So the warehouse worker may have to get to collect some orders in the warehouse. They will walk around with a cart and collect items. They could do that by looking at a device, on L device. The screen would say, go to alley 6, row 7, and pick 3 blue boxes. Okay, then you push your cart. Then when you get there, you pick 2 blue boxes because the third one is damaged. Then you grab the device again, confirm 2, and you enter that third one is missing, damaged, need to restock by pressing buttons. If you do it by voice, the device stays in your pocket. You wear a headset. The headset tells you go to alley 6. Okay, alley 6. Row 6. I'm in front of row 6. Pick 3 blue boxes. Picking 2 blue boxes, the third one is damaged. We need to restock. And you do that while using your hands, while moving, while manipulating things. So you have a clear productivity gain that can in some case go up to 20, 30% in total time saved doing that. Another example could be, let's take a surgeon. A surgeon, what you see today is a lot of the medical equipment gets digitized. Often that is done by adding in the equipment some Android tablet or some kind of similar stuff. But then the surgeon will be operating the equipment, but from time to time need to change some settings. Say you want to turn on UV light and take a picture. Today, if you have to use a touchscreen to do that, well, a touchscreen is a pretty bad interface for a surgeon that has their gloved hand in the sterile field. So the way it would be done would be to put a nurse in front of the touchscreen, and the surgeon would tell the nurse, okay, zoom in on the upper left corner, switch to UV light, and take a picture of the tumor. And this is something that we can embed in the device that it can understand the surgeon and take the actions directly without having to put a nurse to have a nurse in such a, let's say, inefficient job of pushing buttons on a touchscreen. So freeing up basically the nurse for more useful medical tasks, not just pushing buttons. Another example could be a field service technician that has to do some maintenance on the control panel and wonder, oh, what's the torque for the upper left bolt? Well, if they don't, they may have the manual in a tablet in their backpack, but if they have to stop what they are doing, drop the tools, remove the gloves, grab the tablet, search for the manual, look for the information in the manual. Okay, look up the torque, then start doing it again, and then take the tablet again and put in the report what they've been doing. That's pretty annoying. And frankly, a lot of the technicians would not do that. They would just work out of memory. Oh, I think it's 12. I will put 12, and later, when they get back to the truck, they would put that in the report. What they can do with voice, again, they would have an earpiece. The earpiece would connect to the tablet. The voice assistant would get the query, what's the torque in the upper left corner? The voice assistant would fetch the manual on the tablet, say a PDF manual, see on the picture in it, on the diagrams in it, that the upper left bolt is bolt B17, then use that to look up in a table that the torque for bolt B17 is 8 to 10 Newton meter, and pass on that information to the technician. Okay, that's bolt B17. It should be torqued between 8 and 10 Newton meter. So that would be probably a good example. What we do for the plain voice, like for the speech output, we would rely on partners that provide us with the technology, but we would add our own elements to deal with the specifics of the task. Like in this case, understanding what's the torque on the bolt is one thing. Being able to retrieve the response in the manual and to convey it given the context and history, that's a more complex task.
It seems like you guys have a variety of really impactful kind of wow moments within a lot of different industries. How are you guys, obviously you found some traction out the gate. How are you able to communicate that from like a prospective client that might be looking at Vivoka?
Yeah, I mean, one of the challenges we have found is that it's the whole chicken and egg problem. So we do not sell directly to the warehouse most of the time. We would be selling to the companies that build the software for the warehouse, to the warehouse management system developers. We would not sell to the hospitals. We would sell to the companies making the medical equipment for the hospitals. And quite often, when you have that B2B2B model, Well, the middleman wonders, oh, my customers are not asking about it, so why would I put it in? But their customer may not know about it. So it's sometimes a bit complex because you have to convince the customers that they want the feature that you can provide them. So it's a two-level communication that has to happen, both to increase the awareness of the end customers and then to make sure that when they request the feature, the middleman or the middleware, it's not the middleware strictly speaking, it's more the middleman knows that they can come to us to get it.
In terms of then communicating that across the B2B chain, what are some lessons or insights for fellow founders that you found are highly effective?
It's always situational. So there is not a one size fits all. So if I take my medical example, trying to talk to every doctor in North America about it, that they can go and request the equipment manufacturer to add it, that wouldn't work. In that case, you have to make a compelling case for the equipment manufacturers that they realize what you can bring them. And you have to show that they will have a better product by adding those kind of features into their product. So you need to build use cases, evidence from the end user viewpoint to convince the product manager, in that case, to add it into the product. What we have seen also to be quite successful in logistics is, in fact, to work with larger warehouses that are more open about innovation and that may be prescriptors for that innovation to their suppliers. So you need to communicate with both the end customer and your customer in the middle B. And when you do that, you have to understand they don't value the same thing. So the end customer will care about, say, the productivity gain. The warehouse management system company will care about, yes, the productivity gain for their customers, because that's what they will be selling, but also what will it cost them to integrate it? Do they need to change their product much or not? Is it easy or not for them to add voice to their product? That's you need to have a value proposition that is attractive for the end customer, but that also is an attractive proposition for the middle business in that chain, in that B2B2B chain. And that requires, usually what you get to the end is also valid for the middle, but you need to add extra elements to it to be attractive at that level. And being able to help that level to sell to the NB is also important. If, for instance, you say, oh, you should use our voice because it's the easiest one to integrate, okay, but you also have to convince them that, hey, by the way, once you've put voice in the system, you will be able to sell a 20% improvement to your customers.
Well, I imagine the first few case studies were hard to get, but now that you have some to reference, I think that's not only that, but your enterprise experience. I think it's
but it's a repeating process. You do that for one use case, you get one use case convincing, then you scale it, then you pick the new use case. So you have to repeat that process, do the first one, get the evidence, and then repeat it. So it's not like one thing. It's a continuous process because unlike, voice is not, everybody knows about voice now. It's not a novelty. It works more or less, to more than less those days, but you have to convince people that, okay, with voice, you can do this. And sometimes convince them that, hey, today it's working. When I started developing voice system 20 years ago, most of them did not work well. Let's be frank. We have all been faced with those call centers. Please say one or press one to talk to an agent. And that was not working too well. But now it's really getting to the point where I feel the technology is at a maturity threshold where it can be useful even in difficult situations. And we are working on that. One of the things we have been improving is when you work in warehouses or with doctors or with field service technicians, a lot of them have accents. Why? Because you may have foreign people, workers in warehouses, you have foreign doctors in hospitals, and you may have outside of the US, field service technicians using manuals in English when English is not their native language. So you have to cope with their accents. And we have added to our voice AI system the ability to deal with those problems. Noise is also very common in those environments, making sure that it's working well in noise, well with accented speech. Things that would have been very challenging 5 years ago, but now with the advances in AI, we can make them work well in that setting.
I mean, that's a very dynamic language capability, and I can only imagine then the context needed, not only in the industries, but then in the specific use cases within, I mean, surgery is very different than physiotherapy or related fields.
Yeah, basically anywhere where people have their hands busy and or eyes busy and need to interact with equipment. And that's why you saw voice first, well, in call centers, because obviously call centers, people have no way to come and press buttons in the call center. Then the cell phones, because especially while driving, or cars, because in a car, it's better not to use your hands to do things. And that's where voice came in first. But now that it's getting to the right vectors are there to make it successful in industry. It's not only about the technology. It's about making sure the technology can run at the right price point. You could have made voice, and a lot of the stuff you see done with AI today, you could have built 20 years, maybe not 20, but 10 years ago. It would have costed you millions. Now, with LLMs, you can do something, you can automate some tasks for probably a few €1,000 of investment, tens of thousands. Whereas if you had wanted to do that 10 years ago, you would have needed to build a complete dedicated NLP system plus automation, and that would have costed you millions. So that means that you can tackle problems that are smaller and that you can bring that technology to more people. Warehouses adopted voice, probably started adopting it 15 years ago, but it was expensive. You had to build dedicated headsets, dedicated hardware to run the software on. So that was very costly. Only the very big companies like Nike, Walmart would invest in that the technology back then. Now, because you can get some standard Android devices from Zebra, you can run things for a lot less. So even a small warehouse with 15, 20 workers could potentially deploy voice and get benefits.
Well, I mean, it's very exciting that you're seeing the democratization of voice across a lot of different industries, Vivoka obviously being in the center of all that. I'd be curious to hear your perspective on the kind of the contrast or the similarities of selling into enterprise within Europe relative to the US. Is there key differences? Are there similarities? What have you seen?
There are differences in the sense that Europe versus US, but you also have differences, I would say, per industry. Some industries are more conservative than others, and that's something you see on both sides. What I see as differences is obviously because we do voice AI languages. When you deal with languages in the US, if you cover English and Spanish, you're pretty much done with the vast majority of the US. If you want to deal with the European market, you have to cover 15, 20, 25 languages. For something that relies on language, LLMs also rely on language, you need a much broader linguistic coverage. The second thing is that each country tend to be there are differences between states in the US, but it's not as big as differences between countries in Europe. And it's quite important for your go-to-market. You're not going to sell in Germany out of France if you don't have people who speak German. And you can say, okay, I can try to sell in Germany speaking English. You can try, but at the end of the day, speaking German, having German natives will be important. You want to sell into Italy? Well, having Italian natives will help you. So it's a more fragmented market than the US. And in the fields we're operating, we are most of the time don't talk to big multinational companies because there are a few, but most of them tend to be more national companies or even regional, say logistics. As a consequence, you have to have that more local approach. Medical is slightly different. In medical, we have customers that are much bigger. That would be international companies, and there they would be not much in terms of difference between the US and Europe.
So that's fascinating insight on the language difference and the nationality impact on those sales. I appreciate that perspective. As it relates to Vivoka, where do you see the company going over the next, call it 24 months?
Well, we have been investing quite a lot in technology. We have started to gain some very good traction in the logistics market. That's the first one we've been focusing on. I want to keep expanding beyond my, right now, I think my go-to-market is too small. I don't have enough salespeople, to put it in other words. We're in the process of completing our Series A, and the investment will mainly be in go-to-market. So adding additional sales resources. And I think we are underrepresented in the North American market. So it's going to be one big area. I would like to start to explore some emerging markets like Latin America with partners, because I think that those markets, that's a democratization of technology. And I would say the big customers in the West already have adopted the technology. But now that the price point is getting much lower, there is a big opportunity to expand that technology into the smaller warehouses, for instance, and into the markets that have a lower cost of labor. Because since it's productivity driven, if it's more expensive to automate than to hire more people, people don't automate, just hire more people.
Makes a ton of sense.
So that's going to be the main focus of growth for us. And then on the R&D front, we continue to add more AI capabilities to the system to improve it and to add additional AI capabilities. Our vision is that eventually what we want to offer is, call it a copilot, an assistant that would be able to assist you during your workday. We're talking to a big retail distributor who says, oh, during the course of a day, one of my employee may have to use 5, 6, 10, 12 different applications. They may be in the back, in the refrigerators, collecting some orders. They may have to move into the store to put things on shelves. They may have to do an inventory. And every time they have to use an app for that. And the idea was creating that AI assistant that can help them during the day, help them navigate through tasks and give them a consistent way of working. Because of all of those quite often legacy applications for them, it means that when they get a new workers, they have to learn to use a few dozen apps, which is quite a challenge when you have a high turnover. And if you replace that by one single AI assistant that you can talk to, it makes it a lot easier. So what should I do next? Go and fetch 3 cans of Coke. Well, that's pretty easy. I really would understand that. But if you instead, you have to say, okay, I have to open the task manager app. My next task is to do some stock picking. Okay, let's open the stock picking task. It's a different learning curve. And the idea would be, and our vision is that in time, we should have that universal assistant in the logistic area that can help people go through their workday. And the
Sounds like
same
it's
in the
almost like
medical field. I would like my assistant to be able to be context aware, to take into account not only what the surgeon says, but what the surgeon is busy doing, watching the hands of the surgeon. And based on the context, if I say, what is this? Well, the system should be able to say that this refers to something. It's not just the word this, it's something that the surgeon is doing, is uncovering, is pointing at, and to take that into account.
would it be fair to say that that's almost like an agent layer of
Yeah.
sorts, like where it can? Okay,
Yes, that I mean, as I said, call it assistant, call it copilot, call it agent. The terminology is keep changing, but the idea is that you have. So I sometimes say today what we are building is a third hand. You're busy doing
sure.
something, and while your hands are busy, your third hand does something else for you. And eventually, you want that third hand to be a full third person or second person next to you that you can ask, talk to, and that will help you fetch information, use the context, retrieve data, action things for you, and just extend you, empower you while your hands are busy.
I mean, the expansion of value as to how you outline that product roadmap is highly compelling. I think that's a very noble vision that you outlined there. Is it challenging? Obviously, you're working in a lot of different international markets across different industries. Is it challenging to arrive at prices? I mean, you've got different currencies involved, you've got different industries and end buyers, like, and different value props, really. How do you even manage that?
Painfully, is probably the answer.
Sure.
But more seriously, there's a lot of discovery. Every time you enter a new market, almost every time you deal with a new customer, you discover some of their challenges, not only technical, but also business model, how they price it. And that's something we keep adjusting. That's one of the reasons why I was very attracted by Vivoka. It's a small company, which means that we have a lot of flexibility in the way we can price. If a customer says, I want a monthly subscription, we can do that. I want an annual subscription, we can do it too. I want a one-time perpetual license, we could also do it. So we have a set of list prices with different business models, but we have the flexibility to adapt to the customer needs, not only technically, but also in terms of business models. Most customers want their suppliers to match their business model. If I sell monthly, I want to pay my customer monthly. If I sell quarterly, I want to pay my suppliers quarterly. So you need to bring that flexibility in. So we have a good understanding of the value and the price, and then we have the ability to tailor the way we structure that value depending on the customer and their needs.
Well, and I imagine if you can get that matrix right with both the end user and then the service partner in the middle, it's a pretty high retention model.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I mean,
well,
I sometimes tell my investors, they say, It's a complex market. It's a slow market to get in. You have to, it's not like, let's put this as a SaaS application in the cloud. People put in their credit card and voila, you're good. No, it's a lot more complex. But that complexity, if you can crack the code, gives you a pretty big barrier to entry.
Well, and then speaking to multiple stakeholders across the value chains, I think that makes it, while challenging initially, if you can get that buy-in and alignment, that makes it really compelling in terms of long-term solutions. Well, I guess as it relates to your team and like your growing momentum, kind of what would you describe as like Vivoka's culture? What's it like going into the office each day, or what's the team like in terms of a general culture?
I think that when I came to the company, I didn't found the company. I joined it for this. That's a story in itself, but for another time maybe. When I joined it, what I found was pretty much your typical engineer startup, founded by people rather fresh out of school with a bunch of PhDs, so very technology centric. And the culture was a very deep focus on building the right technology, innovation at the technical level. What I did try to bring and change is to shift that to more of a customer focus. So first, find the problem of the customer, understand the problem of the customer, then use your technology to solve it. Don't say, I have a technology and maybe it will solve your problem. Start from the problem. And that's what we have been doing. I was describing what I was mentioning, like accents. Our customer tell us that accents cause issues. Let's solve the accent problem. Our customer tell us they want to access manuals. Well, let's see how this could be done. And as you do that, you peel the onion. You discover more complexity, more technical challenges, and you develop solutions for that. And you say, okay, now that I have this thing that I have developed to solve accent issues, well, in fact, the algorithm behind it, the technology behind it can be used also to solve vocabulary issues.
Fascinating.
Because it's about the system didn't recognize exactly the words I say because there is something close to it, like an accident version of it, because it's not in its vocabulary. And the same technology can be used to correct things. There's a famous sentence, I don't know if you've ever heard about it. It's how to recognize speech. How to recognize speech. Okay, now, how to recognize speech. How to wreck a nice beach. It
I've
sounds
not,
very
no.
close.
Yeah.
And with my French accent, it's probably very difficult to tell the difference between the two.
Right,
But
right.
you have that situation, and what our technology would do would say, "Oh, this is a podcast about technology and voice AI. How to recognize speech, probably the right thing." Or it's a podcast about environmental disasters and the Amoco Cadiz oil tanker catastrophic event a few years ago. Quite a few. Then how to recognize beach is probably the right interpretation. But it's not obvious from the outside, but the technology that we use to solve that, the AI tech we use to solve that is pretty much the same.
That's amazing. Talk about dynamic capabilities of the team. That's
Yeah.
really cool. But I think your focus on the end customer's problems and then scaling that back is very wise and evident then in the traction that you're seeing. So not only congratulations to the customer success, but then obviously it's attracting some investment dollars as well. What, I guess, do you have any general advice for founders that might be listening to the podcast today on, obviously you have a lot going on at Vivoka. How do you best manage all that?
I would say keep the goal in mind, because it's very easy when you're to get distracted, to chase every opportunity that comes in front of the door. So you have to find the right balance between keeping the goal in mind. I want to build some technology for logistics. Oh, but I have this opportunity, looks nice. Maybe I should pursue that one instead. The problem is if you do that, you keep switching. So you have to find the right balance between pursuing your goal with enough perseverance to achieve it, which means ignoring some opportunities you may see along the way, because you cannot, as a startup, chase every single opportunity. Focus on a few markets. That's why we started with logistics. We build technology in logistics that can be reused elsewhere, and then we can expand it. But our primary focus has been logistics. But along the way, if you find out that your vision is not right, does not match the market, that you don't find the demand you're expecting for what you're building, then pivot. Try it elsewhere. When Vivoka started, that was way before I joined, the initial focus was to the company was founded by two engineers that loved the Iron Man movie, and they wanted to build Jarvis.
Yeah.
And they started with the idea to build some holographic voice assistant. So it was a little holographic display that you could interact by voice, that could control your home, and like Jarvis helping controlling Tony Stark's home in the movie. And they started to build the technology for that. But then that's not a market that's a very tough market. And that's a market where it's very tough to penetrate for a set of reasons, and where they were not well equipped to do it. So at one point, the decision was to pivot towards the technology that would be provided for those professionals instead, because that was a consumer market, and going to a B2B market instead. And that was a smart thing to do, because you have to understand that your initial vision doesn't match, or you're not able to, you don't have what the technology is not ready. The market is not ready. You don't have the funding to invest for 5 years to make it happen. Then you have to pivot. So you have to find that sweet spot between perseverance and flexibility, and there is no receipt for that. I mean, you have to feel it in your gut, but you have to always to pause and ask yourself: is it a distraction, or is it a sign that what I thought initially was wrong? So you have to challenge yourself. You have to trust your vision. You have to push for it, but you should not be afraid of challenging your vision, because maybe it's wrong.
Certainly. We've seen that directly at Solus Partners as well, with a number of different prior experiences. So I think that that's wisdom that's well earned. Within that approach, especially in the early days, how are you guys able to open up those conversations with, like, so for example, if it was a warehouse, a software provider, how are you able to, like, even start those initial prospecting conversations to open up that value prop?
Basically, good old salesmanship, finding the customer, thinking, okay, those guys could be the right people. You need to hunt for those customers. You need to find them. You need to identify who you should be talking to. Then go get the door slammed in your face a few times, more than a few times usually, until you find someone willing to listen, and then listen to them too, and get your first customer that way. You may get the door slammed 10 times, 20 times, but until you find the right person to talk to in the right company, and then you can get started. Sometimes you're lucky, you find it easily. Sometimes it takes a while before you can not only find the right company, but the right person in the company, because you may be talking to a guy who's in charge of purchasing, who will tell you, you know what, I will talk to you once somebody from the product management team tell me I need this. Or you may talk to the R&D guys who will tell you, well, until a customer asks for it, I'm not putting it in. So you need to understand how does a company operate, and who do I need to sell to? Because you don't sell a purchaser the way you sell to a product manager, the way you sell to an R&D lead. And sometimes the one way to get in is to have an evaluation version. So make it very easy for people to try your stuff. Make sure that when they try it, it works, because that's a nice foot in the door. But be ready to follow up, because the developer that may have discovered your stuff and is playing with it is probably not the one who's going to make the decision. So you need to, once you have that first entry, you need to follow up with the company, find how they make their decisions, and use that to get in.
Well, I think that's great advice and perspective there. And oftentimes that follow-up efforts, I think, across all of software sales is sometimes the most challenging. So clearly you guys are doing something really hard and doing it well.
And it depends what you sell. As I said, some piece of software are very easy to sell in a very packaged way, self-service way, as a SaaS service. Make it easy to create a test account, let people put their credit cards in, and you can go quite far with that model. So it's very possible for some product and some industries that you don't need to do that. But when you sell in that B2B2B setting, that type of product, that OEM model with technology, usually that doesn't work that way. You really have to work your way through the company, understand how they decide, make sure that you can give them some evidence that what you do is a good solution for them, and that's how you end up closing the deal.
That makes a lot of sense, and oftentimes it's very overlooked, especially within enterprise sales. So hats off to you guys. I guess just final question here. What would be like your end goal or your dream state for Vivoka maybe in 5-10 years? What does that vision look like?
So 5 or 10 years, that's in startup years. So dog years, that's 60 to 17 years. So you're asking
Right.
for quite a
Yes.
long-term vision, right? And I would say, as I said, I would like Vivoka to be a provider of those, call it agent, but I like assistant, because that's really what we are doing. We are not replacing people with agents. We're providing assistant that will assist humans that need to interact by voice with professional systems, do that more naturally, more smoothly, as seamlessly as possible, that they can focus on the part of the task where they add value. The surgeon, maybe the fine hand gesture needed to do some brain surgery. The worker, it may be interacting with people and getting the order ready. Basically, use voice, and not voice, but AI more generally, to provide that third hand now, but eventually that personal assistant for professional. So not in the sense of an executive assistant, but really some computer component, some agent, if you want to call it, that is there, that is making it very easy for people, professionals, to work with the system they need to use in their job.
Well, I think that specialized assistant vision is something that's going to be really cool. And I think it makes sense that it's specialized now across 3 industries, but I think that that can only grow within, and obviously be a little bit different than relative to like other general LLMs that'll try to do a Jarvis-like model. You guys are going to have leaps and bounds, more context and
No,
data.
and we want a way to think of it is we want a factory to build custom assistants for tasks that is as automated as possible. The idea would be that you come to it and say, hey, my problem is the following, and the system would generate the right assistant for you to solve your problem that you can use and interact with after that.
I think that's a noble vision to unlock, and I think that it can only enhance society, especially in surgery and medical, and even just how we get our goods and services. So that's very exciting.
Thank you.
Christopher, I really appreciate your time today. Thank you for joining us at Solus Partners.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you,
Happy to.
Stephen. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
You too.